I love Stromlight Archive. It's epic, it has great magic, a complex world building, but I am the one to like Piranesi, Ocean at the End of the Lake, Justice of Kings? No, I did not think so. So today we're gonna see 13 books that I thought I was gonna hate, but that I ended up giving 5 stars. Starting with Piranesi. This is a very short standalone that I assure you has lots of good things and just not so many pages. It is magical realism and I wasn't really sure that this was my thing. It is a pretty introspective book and it is being pitched as something that you need to read slow, that you need to savor. So I thought this wasn't gonna be for me, but I ended up loving it so much. It was my whole personality. It has a great mystery. It is true that it has a way different main character. In this case, we have Piranesi and he is trying to solve the great mystery that is that he lives in this massive house almost as big as the world and he doesn't know what is happening in here. The way in which he approached this world, it's in the scientific perspective, but it is such a good read. It has great character. He is a cinnamon roll. The mystery, the thriller that needs to be unraveled, it is very puzzling and it's done in a way that is just so amazing. And we continue with another standalone that is magical realism at its best with The Ocean at the End of the Lake by Neil Gaiman. So yes, I do love Nate Gaiman, so there were chances that I was gonna like this story, but I was pushing it for years. I wasn't sure what to expect, too dark or childish, and in this case we will have the regression of a man that will need to go back to the house in which he grew up, and while being there he will remember something very unique that happened when he was a child. Even if you like stories that are incredibly epic, I assure you this will make it for you because it just has some sadness and some vividness and it's a very unique story. And then we move to the story that I heard being praised so many times, but I thought it was going to be too dark for me, and that is The Justice of Kings. This book has the Witcher vibe in terms of the setting. We'll have this village that it's surrounded by things that are not quite natural. Something happens, people, it's very secretive, and I was pushed back because I knew that it had a religious and very political theme at its core, and I was hesitant for it. And I love it. It took me a minute to get to understand the politics and the religion and how the different things were working. Also, the magic, it's something that we will get to learn throughout the book. It's something that starts small, and I started hating the main character and how she followed this man. But then I thought that it was very well done, the idea of having this external perspective on almost the main character and how he is approaching this life, how the mysteries are faced to him, the decisions, the good, the bad choices. I was so surprised, and this was probably one of the best reads of this year so far. Another massive surprise was the fan fiction Manacled. I've never read fanfiction and I'm not even a super huge fan of Harry Potter. I've never been there wanting Draco and Hermione to potentially have something. So all of these elements that have been praised, I was like, not necessarily for me. But then I heard so many other booktubers raving about these, praising that this was a very dark retelling of the story because in here, Harry Potter died. The Order of the Phoenix lost, and Voldemort it's ruling. And there's a blend of the Handmaid's Tale also in it. And I was so amazed about how this was done. Definitely dark and depressing, but it has broken Harry Potter for me forever. This story makes much more sense to me, and I was legit consumed with this story from beginning to end. Another story that was a massive surprise, it's Gideon the Ninth. This is a science fiction fantasy blend, and it's a very polarizing book in the sense of you won't be able to understand what happens for the longest of times. The characters are witty, but they are crafted in a way that they are also savage. They are all necromancers. They are in space. You don't really understand what is happening. There's trials at its core. So the premise was interesting, but everyone was, you won't understand a thing. And I agree. I did not understand as much as I thought thought I would, but I love it nonetheless. The characters were charismatic, were funny. There were lots of different things involved. It took me also a second to understand them, but once that I did, I really liked this story. The twists and turns were fascinating, and overall it's a story that I will 100% continue reading. And let's move to other type of surprise. In this case, I adored Circe, but there were some elements that I thought I was gonna hate. The first thing, although I love Greek mythology, I knew this book was gonna be very autobiographic, and I did not know much about her, and she wasn't this myth that I always wanted to know about. And I was coming in knowing that it was gonna be a very tiring experience, in the sense of we will follow her since she is almost a child until, the end of their days. But oh boy, was I wrong. This story, it's fascinating. Yes, it has a very character-driven approach, but there are so many different adventures that happen, and everything is told in a way that it's so beautiful, so mesmerizing, that I wasn't able to take my attention out from this story. Also, the narration, it's fantastic, and I now feel for Circe. And let's continue with Babel by R.F. Kuang. I am not a huge fan of dark academia. I enjoyed that setting, but it's not something that I read much, and it's because I usually find it fairly predictable and not necessarily super epic. So it wasn't my thing. Also, it's a standalone that is pretty chunky, and I knew it was going to be very character driven, which I'm usually fine with that. But this author has an ability to craft very raw emotions, and I knew that the magic here was very low and that it wasn't really playing a key role in the story, but I loved it. I think it's fantastic how we get to know these different characters and how they start being students and trying to learn more and become more, and how they will play a role in this potential revolution that might happen. It is phenomenal how the relationship between these characters evolves over time, how we get to see these characters grow, advance, and I just cannot recommend enough. And now we move to a somewhat opposite experience with Legends and Ladders. Now, this has been pitched as high fantasy with low stakes, and it is exactly that. It is not epic. It hasn't had great magic, and the characters are charismatic, but not necessarily are super unique. But then why did I love it so much? Because it's phenomenal, it's chilled, and it's the first cozy fantasy that I've read, and I've adored it so on the level. This is the perfect palate cleanser in case you need something in between of other more heavy reads, and I really enjoyed the premise of how our main character had a turbulent, very violent past, and now she has a dream of opening this coffee shop, and that is exactly what she'll do. And believe it or not, one of my favorite standalones of all time, I thought I was gonna hate, and that is Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a Jane Austen story with war. So I wasn't really into the Regency setting, and although I enjoy war stories, I am not super into the mess of the war. I quite enjoyed more the aftermath of that and how the society needs to be rebuilt after that happened. And in here, it has just those two elements, and it's not a lot of magic, and I was so surprised because I loved it from the second page. I knew this was going to be a favorite. I was so happy when I started reading it. A little bit of a chunky, but it honestly reads so easily. The characters are charismatic. We will see the event of the war and how you can be brainwashed. There's a little bit of propaganda in here. Who is good, who is bad. We see the PTSD of war, and enemies to lovers, that is done brilliantly here. There's a pen pal component which I thought was really unique, and it had something that I wasn't able to, stop reading. it's phenomenal read. Another standalone that was phenomenal, it's Kaikei. I really thought I was gonna hate this book. First, autobiographic. Second, we follow the evil perspective, so I thought I was gonna have a lot of trouble connecting with the main character. I thought this was gonna be the kind of a story where you're starting a place in which you are seeing the story and you end up feeling like you understand that main character. But it wasn't like that at all. It was a beautiful experience. Really surprised me how the dynamic between the different women in the story were blended, were woven, and I cannot recommend this book enough. It made me cry slightly at the end, and it is a great read. And although I love dragons, and in particularly I am a huge sucker for the trope of training them, of bonding them, I wasn't expecting to like His Majesty Dragon by Naomi Novik, because this is a retelling of the Napoleonic Wars, and I wasn't really expecting to like that part of the strategy of the war, but I fell in love so much with this. It is lighthearted, it is funny, it has great animal companions, the training trope was fantastic, and I overall really enjoyed that piratey setting. And getting close to the end, we have the only young adult book here, and it is also a standalone, and that is The Kingdom of Bag. So yes, gorgeous book cover. We will follow the story of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and his sister Nannerl Mozart. So I thought that element wasn't going to be for me, and I heard it was a somewhat sad story, and yes, it is, but it's also beautiful, and it made me reflect so much, and I really enjoyed it. Both siblings played and performed, and when they were going from one city to another, they get bored, they wanted to cope with reality, and they created, and this is real, the Kingdom of Bag. And the author took that idea and created this story where these characters were able to get into the Kingdom of Bag, and we will get to see how Nannerl needs to face the harsh reality of being a woman in the society and also growing up. It was beautiful. And the last book, and I'm honestly shocked that I loved this so much, it is The Bear and the Nightingale, so the Winter Night trilogy. This is a deeply religious story, and it is the fight between the Christian and the pagan religious at its core, and I was not compelled about that. It has lots of folklore as well, and I was so not interested at the beginning about this story, but how the character evolves through time, how the stakes are incredibly high, and more than that, how our main character made me believe that I could also be independent, that I can also have my ideas and just follow them. It was so inspiring, it was beautiful, definitely wintry vibes, and it is very character driven, but it has stakes that are very high. It is dark at times, it is savage, but it is again done in a way that I was mesmerized, and I cannot forget this story, and I want to read more. And let me know down below what books you thought you were gonna hate but that ended up loving, because I cannot wait to see and discuss our opinions down below.